Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. You are listening to a rebroadcast of a previously recorded show.
And we do have our next author on the line, Anne Korkeakivi. Anne, how are you? And I hope I didn't foul up that last name. I just try to do the best with live. How are you?
You did it very well, and I'm very well also.
Oh, great. Okay, so we have a panel, just to let you know. It's not just Neil Haley you'll be talking to. You'll be talking to Eric Remmel from Life Improvement Radio, who is our broadcaster, and also my other co-host, Peter Elvich. So we'll go first question for me, your background, Anne. Then they have a lot of good questions they have for you.
Well, I'm from New York City originally, and I was born and raised there, and I originally worked as a freelance journalist for many years before I started writing fiction professionally, although I did always write fiction. My first novel came out in 2012, An Unexpected Guest, and Shining Sea is my second novel.
All righty. But kind of a curveball question, just to kind of see what your thoughts are on this. If you could not write, like it was just physically impossible, you couldn't write, what would you do instead to project your passion to the world?
That's a great question. If I couldn't write, I think to begin with, I would probably drive the people around me nuts because it's, a very important natural form of expression for me and always has been. But, I think that I believe in the kindness and the importance of small acts. And so I think that I would try to in that way, just to begin with, communicate directly with people, the things that I try to communicate through my books, both the thoughts and the beauty.
Gotcha. Cool.
Anne, I was looking at some of the information on the bio of your book, The Shining Sea, and talking about some of the storylines and things like that. It kind of spans the life of a family. What gave you the motivation to write this story? Was it something based on your own life, or just something you've had in your mind you've been working through over the years? How did you get your start on this book?
Well, Shining Sea follows a family after the death of the father, who is a World War II veteran and was a prisoner of war in the Pacific during World War II, over 5 decades, from 1962 to the present time. And I hasten to add that although it does cover a great deal of landscape, it starts in Southern California, it goes to, there's a part in Phoenix, Arizona, there's 100 pages that actually take place in in London in the 80s, and then off the western coast of Scotland, on these remote islands called the Hebrides. It comes back to the U.S. There's Woodstock, et cetera, et cetera. It's not very long. It's 276 pages. But what I wanted to talk about with the book, what I was exploring personally, was the effects of war on, I should say the effect of historical event, and in particular conflict on society in general and families in particular. So I just made up a fictional family to do this with. But I got the idea from something very personal, although nothing in the book is autobiographical even remotely. My father died 4 years ago, right before my first novel came out. And my father was he was in World War II. He served in Italy as infantry and then as a code breaker. And when he died, that was more than 60 years later, he was in his 80s, we discovered that he was still carrying his honorable discharge card, which he wasn't carrying for purposes of veterans' benefits. He was carrying it because it was clearly the seminal experience of his life, the most important one. And as I said earlier, I'm from New York City. I grew up 2 blocks from the central gates of Columbia University in the 60s and 70s. And my very earliest memories are mixed with the protests against Vietnam War. So I kept thinking about that. I kept thinking about the contrast between what my parents clearly carried in their hearts and shared with myself and my sisters because they were, after all, our parents, from their experience of World War II, in contrast to my own experience of war, initial experience of war as a civilian. What I saw watching, because I was much younger than my sisters, I saw things maybe little children wouldn't see, and I would sit down with them and I would watch the body count every night on CBS with Walter Cronkite. So I had a very different impression of U.S. involvement in war. And that contrast and the way that it can bring families together and take them apart was the spur for the novel. Of course, when I started writing it, it took all sorts of different directions, but that's where it came from.
How did your family react to that? Since they were older, but they kind of experienced a lot of the similar things growing up. Do they have any feedback on the book? Did it kind of resonate with them?
Well, I don't know. They haven't said. To be honest.
Sorry to put you on the spot there.
I haven't heard. I wrote a op-ed for Time magazine, which talked a bit about it, and one of my sisters did write to me after that and say that she felt this was so true, and she has been thinking about the same thing herself. But beyond that, I really haven't heard. I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
So, Anne, are you concerned? Yeah. Now, Anne, no, Peter, it's my turn. We'll go round robin. Yep. You can ask 2 questions in a row, but I'm really interested. This is timely as can be now, because we don't know what our next current climate's going to be involving war in the next 4 years. So, in that thought process, in the discussion about Vietnam and protests and different things, and looking at war in general, what are your concerns going forward?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with Shining Sea, and I do want to add that although that is the running background in it, it's not a war novel. It doesn't take place on battlefields, and there are other historical events that come into play. But I have this feeling, looking back at World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the first Gulf War, the second Gulf, looking at this, that we as a society seem to be fooling ourselves, thinking that we're pulling further and further away. That during World War II, everybody was involved. My mother, who was the youngest girl in a large family in the Midwest, she was the only one of her 6 brothers and sisters that was not actively involved in the World War II effort. Even her eldest sister joined the Marines and was trained as an airplane mechanic. So, and she was still affected. And I have the sense that we increasingly feel that there's some people who are actively involved in war and the rest of us are not. And I think that's false. I think that war permeates society, that when there's a war effort, we all are engaged in one way or another. It affects us all. And that's really, one of my great concerns, is that people think that they can say, oh, those are the people over there. That has nothing to do with us. I don't agree with that. I think that we're one world together, and all conflict is pervasive.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So
Definitely.
just a very curious question, because I was curious about the personal connections to your book. Are any of the characters' names any personal connection to you? Like, did you name them based on any personal connection, or is it just kind of a randomized, this is what you thought was a good name?
Well, the novel starts in Southern California, and I did that purposefully because I didn't want there to be anything autobiographical in any way in the book. I've lived in Southern California for 2 years, so I know it topographically, and other places. I've spent a lot of time in Phoenix. There's a whole section, there are a couple chapters in Phoenix. I've been to these places, but they are not my home. So none of the characters are in any way related to people I've ever known. And I chose their names because they seemed very appropriate for the time and the character. So the novel focuses on two of the family members, the young widow, Barbara, and his youngest son, Francis. And Francis is pretty much the pivotal character, and he is kind of a lost soul who wanders trying to find his place. Well, I think there may be in my head somewhere I had a little bit of St. Francis of Assisi in my head. This person but it just, the names just seemed to fit the characters. They definitely were not people in any way, just as in the same way that I didn't really want the characters to be connected to any individual I've ever known.
Gotcha.
What's next on Horizon? Any new works in progress based on this one, or something different in the works?
I've been writing a lot. Just very recently, I've been writing a lot of nonfiction while I've been promoting this book, and it's kind of a nice relief while I think also about the next book. And I'm sort of torn between two projects which I've been working on simultaneously. I took out a point of view character from this novel, which I like very much, and I've been thinking about whether I want to go forth with her story, but I have another story also that I'm very interested in, so too early to really say.
Awesome. Well, where's the best place we can find information on you, purchase your book, and more about you? Where can we go?
Well, I think that you can certainly find more about me on the Internet. I'm on Twitter and Korkeakivi. I'm on Facebook. I have an author page, again, and Korkeakivi. I have an author website, which I like to put all kinds of things up on. I put book suggestions, reading suggestions up on, and people can contact me through the contact page. That's also under Anne Korkeakivi. And you can find my book really most places that books are sold. I think if you go, I know that they have it in, the big bookstores like Barnes & Noble, and I think most independent bookstores have it, and if they don't, if you ask them, they'll get it. And, of course, you can find it online in Amazon or any of those online sellers, too.
All right. Well, thanks for calling, and take care, and leave the line open for our next guest, okay?
Thanks. It was lovely to speak to you.
Take care, guys. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
You're listening to Author's Corner, powered by Life Improvement Radio, live from the Mind Book Fair, and I'm with Peter Elvidge and Eric Remmel.
Thank you for listening to Life Improvement Radio. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own and shall not be construed in any way as advice from Life Improvement Radio. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our website. Personal perspectives expressed by the producers, writers, or editors will always be presented as such. Any rebroadcast or retransmission without the expressed written consent of Life Improvement Radio is strictly prohibited. Thanks for listening.